short days in Greece have given me countless unforgettable experiences. One of them is the wild boar hunting trip in the Aramanthus Mountains during the freezing winter. Here, natural predators are becoming increasingly rare, causing the wild boar population to grow uncontrollably. I, along with a few friends, set out on this hunting trip not just for sport, but to understand a tradition that has been passed down for centuries. From this experience, I began to understand why the Greeks still keep the tradition of wild boar hunting as an integral part of their culture. It is not only about the thrill of the chase, but also about protecting farmland, preserving balance in nature, and building bonds among hunters, after a simple breakfast of bread, olives, and strong Greek coffee. We sat in a familiar vehicle and headed towards the Aramanthus Mountains in western Peloponnese. It was the wild boar meeting season, when males gather and move across long distances, providing favorable conditions for hunting. Thanks to the snow, we could easily track their movements. The frozen air bit at our faces, but the thrill of anticipation kept us warm. I closely followed the tracks, moving quickly as a feeling told me the prey was very near. And sure enough, a dark shape came rushing down from the opposite mountain slope. My pulse quickened. I steadied my breathing, aimed, and fired one clean shot. The boar fell and slid down the slope, its dark body contrasting sharply against the white snow. Still, experience told me never to assume too quickly. In the forest, certainty is always the most reliable companion. I moved closer and fired another shot to make sure it was over. Not far from me, Gilbert was also in position, continuously firing when a whole herd of wild boars appeared unexpectedly. The sound of the animals crashing through the undergrowth was like a storm moving downhill. However, these creatures weren't easy to handle. They ran like the wind, weaving through thick tree trunks in a maze-like manner. Even though Gilbert tried to stay close and fire accurately, it was nearly impossible to aim under such conditions. In a blink of an eye, the entire herd vanished from sight as quickly as they had appeared, leaving only broken branches and steaming hoofprints in the snow. After about half an hour of steady climbing, we reached near the summit of the mountain. The air grew even colder, and the snow beneath our boots thickened, crunching loudly with every step. Hunting instinct sharpened our senses. From the corner of my eye, I noticed sudden movement in the trees. Without hesitation, I raised my rifle and squeezed the trigger before the wild boar could disappear into the brush. It was a clean, efficient shot, the kind every hunter hopes for. The barking of the dogs echoed through the mountains like distant war drums, reminding us that the chase was far from over. Soon, another dark figure appeared, this time dangerously close. Gilbert steadied his rifle and fired a decisive shot. The animal tumbled into the snow, lifeless. For a brief moment, we exchanged a glance of silent satisfaction. But we both knew the race with the wild boars had only just begun. The afternoon hunt was relentless. Seizing every opportunity, we pressed on, guided by the dogs that darted ahead of us with tireless energy. Every bark was a signal, every silence a warning. At times, the snowstorm thickened, forcing us to take shelter. We set up a temporary tent, and I waited inside, listening to the wind howl like a restless spirit. Suddenly, the sound of hounds and distant gunfire pierced the silence. Instinctively, I grabbed my rifle. Out of the curtain of snow emerged the boar, charging straight toward me. With one decisive shot, it collapsed. That moment, alone in the storm, was both terrifying and exhilarating, the very essence of the hunt died by the time evening came. The sky was a gloomy shade of gray. Yet we pressed on, unwilling to leave empty-handed. Hiding behind wild branches, I silently observed another boar's movements. Patience was key. When it reached the perfect position, I raised my rifle and ended the chase with a final, echoing shot. The hunt for that day had reached its end, leaving behind both exhaustion and fulfillment. The challenges we faced were not only about aiming or shooting. They were lessons in patience, resilience, and determination, values deeply embedded in these traditions. In France, particularly in Lorraine, the story was no different. The people there are all too familiar with wild boar hunts. For them, wild boars are not just wild animals. They are destroyers of agriculture, raiders of crops, and carriers of dangerous diseases for livestock. Hunting them is not a choice. It is a necessity. In the vast French forests, we split into small groups to patrol what locals called wild vortex, moving slowly through the frosted undergrowth. My friend Daniel stopped suddenly, whispering, "It seems like they are coming." The forest fell into silence, only broken by the faint crunch of snow. Just seconds later, a herd of wild boars emerged only a few meters away, their powerful bodies breaking through the trees like living tanks. Without hesitation, I raised my rifle and fired. The gunshots tore through the silence like thunder, echoing across the valley. Everything happened so quickly that I barely registered how many times I had pulled the trigger.
If you'll enjoy this video, please like and subscribe my channel for more information.